I'm excited to see you at Microsoft Ignite 2024. My name is Leon Weligi, and I am the Vice President of Product and Chief Product Officer for Power Apps at Microsoft. I'll be hosting a session where you'll learn how to build an intelligent application end-to-end with AI and Power Apps. And don't miss out the Low Code Approach podcast. It's an excellent resource to keep you updated and motivated about everything related to Power Platform, no matter where you are. So plug in and be part of the discussion as we explore the limitless possibilities of low-code development together.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Low Code Approach. I'm Sean Feeney, a Senior Product Marketing Manager on the Power Platform team, and I'm joined by...
Not Wendy Haddad. I think she's still having a bacon emergency right now. My name's Ken Aguilard, and who do we have with us today, Sean?
Well, we're super lucky. We've got a good friend of the podcast decided to show back up because we got some real big news to talk about. We got Mike Bassani, Partner PM Manager on the Dataverse team. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Hey, Sean. Hey, Ken. It's great to be back. I've got my Low Code Approach shirt on. I am ready to go this Friday morning.
Yes, I've heard that's like the number one item on people's shopping list for the holidays, so I appreciate you representing that. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about Dataverse because it is everywhere at Ignite. I'm sure people are reading the blog posts and they're taking a look at the hybrid sessions that are being presented for Microsoft Ignite, and there's a lot of news. So we got the man that knows all the things on the podcast, but a lot of it's going to be centered around knowledge. And in the quick changing world of AI, well, we always introduce new terminology in the entire time. So, Mike, can you help us get grounded, pun fully intended, in what knowledge actually means?
I will absolutely do my best. And knowing all the things with knowledge and grounding, yes, the puns are not lost on me, Sean. It has been an absolute journey over this past year. When I think about Ignite last year, we were just starting to talk about the creation of plugins and how we could extend our Microsoft Copilot. I think Dataverse had one session at Ignite. In the last month and a half, we've been in London, we've been in Dublin, we had customer advisory boards. We've got, I think, 8 sessions at Ignite this year. And the overarching theme is really enterprise knowledge and enterprise search, as you mentioned. And within that, there are a couple different vectors of like, what is knowledge and how does it manifest itself in this new world of apps, large language models and agents, which you're hearing more and more about. And so knowledge is kind of the term that we use to capture data that is important for the use of your application in a business setting, regardless of where it resides. And so the way we kind of think about it internally in the product is large language models themselves are extremely smart, but they are kind of like a smart individual. They don't know a ton about the company inside the 4 walls. And so that smart individual is smart unto themselves. But if you were to bring them into the organization to do your job or to do my job or Ken's job, they perhaps would struggle because they don't have the context of all the things that are happening as it pertains to their job. And so how do we give that smart individual the information that allows them to be more successful at performing the tasks that are critical to the specific nature of the role in the organization? What are the other systems that they might need to learn? How is the data perhaps represented? You have a lot of synonyms and, whether it's item or SKU or ASIN, what have you. And so, these analogs can be transformed very quickly by the use of knowledge inside of an agent. And grounding, which was the second part of your question, is kind of the term that is used when we think about retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, how we think about bringing the data in to the 4 walls for the LLM to reason over with compute, or we just calling the data as like a get call or a get function, and there is no kind of landing of the data and vectorization. Because when that LLM is really humming, what we're doing is we're taking the data primarily. It could be a PDF file, it could be an Excel doc, it could be a Dataverse table. It doesn't really matter. It can be multimodal now, images, what have you, voice. And we're vectorizing that. We're breaking it apart. We're basically like putting it through a shredder and we're plotting it on a 3-dimensional graph. And then we're associating terms to it. And we're doing it all kind of real time. And that RAG function is what makes data grounded versus just calling into ServiceNow or Salesforce and getting the account or getting the CRM information of the account manager or the information associated with revenue in trail 12 months. So that's kind of how we think about knowledge, as basically a way to supercharge the context of an individual, and then also kind of the difference between just knowledge that you're piping in versus knowledge that you're landing and kind of embedding into the model.
So, Mike, I picked up on something that you said inside of there. Well, a lot of things, but one thing in particular that you said was enterprise search. So many organizations have had enterprise search infrastructure. And is this a replacement for? Should they be getting confused about this? How do we define enterprise search in that context?
It's really the next wave of enterprise search. The reason we use the term enterprise search is, to your point, pretty familiar and I think approachable. But at least in my experience here at Microsoft, as well as other organizations, the ability to actually perform enterprise search is pretty painful. The actual responses that you get across the enterprise, even if, Microsoft a few years ago, you tried to look on our internal search site for things, it was varied and in many cases not extremely helpful. And so the reason that you're seeing so much, conversation around the consumer space and consumer search is because that's really where it started to be the most disruptive. It doesn't mean that same disruption shouldn't apply to enterprise. And so we've kind of taken that same analog and said, all right, we can disrupt consumer search. That's great. There's a lot of companies that are in that space. We want to do it for enterprise.
Now that we understand that and the definition of it, what's the canvas for it?
And this is where I'm excited about the approach that we have in the Power Platform broadly and the interconnectivity between Power Apps and Auto and Copilot Studio. These surfaces dynamics, these surfaces have a lot of interplay, and it should be up to the individual which surface they want to use the experiences in. But it's my job to make sure that behind the surfaces, things are operating in a consistent manner with the proper security, the proper role access. In many cases, that data or that RAG function is performing as intended. And so many of our customers and many of you who are also many of your listeners, are starting to see a Copilot pop up in a variety of different surfaces already today.
Right, yeah.
And we're going to continue that kind of democratization of the Copilot experience. But there's a level deeper which we need to go, which is when you're creating applications or processes, how do you expose those across a different set of surfaces? It's not just create an app, publish an app, and you're on your way. There's an entire ecosystem of individuals that are operating inside of teams. And we're starting to try and blur that boundary for apps that are created in Power Apps becoming intelligent apps and being able to move them into the Teams interface, because that's where the modern information worker is happening. We're starting to think about how we can embed flows in a more natural way inside of Copilot Studio, for agent creation. And all along the while, having the same, role-based access control and user ACLs that we have created through the security lens of PPAC and over top of the Dataverse data.
Actually, you bring up a really good point, Mike. Ken and I and a couple other members of Microsoft were at a symposium in Texas, and they did I guess you could say a debate between collaboration tools, right, and business application tools. And it was really, really interesting. And it sounds like what you're doing and the work you're doing is kind of blurring the lines between the two and taking the best of both worlds and providing those business applications in more collaborative tooling. And so I'm going to touch on something that you mentioned a while before regarding enterprise search and maybe just the poor results that are returned. I know there's a lot of work that's going into allowing makers and users of knowledge to kind of bring more advanced functionality to the types of results that are returned. So Ken and I we both work in Microsoft and Power Platform, but he deals on the product side and engineering, you too, Mike. I deal in marketing, so I use fluffy words all the time. Are there any tools that are there that can make me make sense of what Ken types when I read a document from Ken?
What I heard was, I'm way too technical, Mike, is what I just heard. and Sean's way too fluffy.
It's
So,
all pops and whistles to me. I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? There's a spot for everybody in this world, you know? So I think that's the beautiful thing about it. Whether you're writing lines of code in JSON and Visual Studio or you're crafting these amazing blogs, like I will try and distill it down so that when Ken sends you, that annotated swagger, you know exactly what's happening. Or when you send that Ignite blog through, Ken doesn't have to like sit down for 4 hours and try like decipher all the words with a thesaurus. So yeah, so on that front, man, I guess guys, like there are a couple things that are coming that are really cool. I haven't seen the debate between Biz Apps and Modern Apps and Modern Work, but was it Biz Apps and Modern Work? What was the debate on?
it was, yeah. It was,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And that is the purpose, to try and blur the lines, I think, as you said, and also like acknowledge that prompting is becoming, in many cases, maybe not for Ken on a day-to-day basis, but for the broader group, the developer language of the future. And so when you see that email come through, the ability in its most easy application is you have with your M365 and Outlook, you've got the summarize this email. Super easy way, very approachable way to take the information that's in that email, which is effectively stored in the Microsoft Graph. It's been vectorized because it's there, and then we pull that answer back. And so that same approach can happen with a Word document, can happen with SharePoint OneDrive, can happen with things that are in obviously Dataverse table because it's organized with the structure. And we've built now that connection to Azure AI Search as well. And so one of the things that from a tooling perspective, as you mentioned, that we're going to talk about Ignite is this idea of knowledge curation. You know, things are moving fast, but 3 months ago, it was just drag and drop a file. And that file would be partitioned and vectorized, and you'd get the RAG function, and away you go. You can now ask questions about this document. Great, that's fine. However, that's fine for maybe a simple transactional process where you're trying to get a claim in from a customer and you just need to look at the claim, and then you need to provide the output and have that output, show up as form fill inside of a Power App. That's a very valuable use case. I don't want to gloss over that, but that is a very tangible thing that can be done today. What we're going to be talking about at Ignite is how do you daisy chain or connect these individual knowledge sources together into a single response, both as a user as well as a developer with structured outputs in JSON. So what that means is I can type every time I get an email, and I can kind of like / mention an email from Ken, include any reference to account table, and I'll include the Dataverse table associated and return it in 3 bullet points with a high five emoji. And so I can save that as an individual component, but for Ken, it's effectively like an AI function. It's effectively prompt, or using Prompt Builder. If folks are familiar with AI Builder behind the scenes, it's one of the fastest growing products we have inside of the Power Platform. And that is allowing the user in a text way, or a drag and drop way, and for our folks that are truly on the low-code side or perhaps closer to your world, Sean, to be able to connect different knowledge sources together in a single response, rather than I'm asking a question, it's gonna go and pick information from this document. I'm gonna have another question, and I have to kind of guide the LLM to go get it from the Dataverse table. It's actually saying I'm gonna call this specific prompt. This prompt inside of it has knowledge sources that it's kind of been deterministically chosen to pull from, and then I'm going to get that response. And then obviously on the developer side, you can configure that output if you wanted in JSON versus just having it render in chat as it is today in kind of the Copilot Studio or in your Power App.
So you covered many, many topics on there, but let's talk about the quality of the response, right? And like, say I've built an agent and I'm working with my peers and I'm making all these calls out to governance and security of Power Platform. And they're just like, dude, I don't have the background information on this. And so I have to go back into the prompt that I've made. And as it relates to the knowledge that I've incorporated, maybe there's an FAQ doc that can create it. Maybe there's a document that you created, Mike, that goes over different types of data sources and how we interact with them. I want to make sure that my peers on the rest of the marketing team can understand this. And I see that it's not going. Like, what tools do I have available to improve the types of responses that are coming to them? How can I see how well the knowledge is that I've put together, like how well it's performing in the agents that I build? Like, how can I improve that?
Yeah, so this was one of the top pieces of feedback post-build when we released, kind of the elevated knowledge experience and even actions itself. For the maker persona, for the person that's building these things, how do I know that it's functioning as intended? How do I know that my end users are getting the responses that they need. And, again, to go through the kind of the journey that we've been on, it started as like thumbs up, thumbs down, in the response. Simple. We didn't do a very good job being vocally self-critical on aggregating that information or providing it back to the maker. It was for our internal telemetry. And so the other thing that we'll be talking about at Ignite is the creation of, within that curation experience of knowledge, the ability to have analytics associated with that. And so we have built into, and specifically for the folks that are going inside of MCS, we have kind of two areas that we've added. So we have a section called Track Knowledge Use, which allows you to see how many times knowledge has been used in the responses, as well as like the error rate of overall inquiries that are happening. So they might be interacting with the agent, and the agent may be giving them a response, but the response may not be using the knowledge that you provided it. It may be defaulting back to other pieces. And that's an indication of an error. You may be giving information, but it's not as good. It's not helping that user who is off the street become a rock star employee. It's just relying on that user off the street to answer the question. The second, based on the role access you have inside of Power Platform by design, is we have the ability to, in the section called Improved Answer Rate, see actually the conversation history. So you could go and look at the queries that your individuals have had, and we're beginning to bucketize them and thematically tie them together to say, we're getting a lot of questions around vacation policy in France, and it's not figuring out to use, French specific knowledge for that. We need to actually build the prompt differently to address this query. You're getting a lot of repetition and errors associated with that. Can you go and modify the agent so you're just not dumping in, consistently more and more information to the LLM? You're then actually saying, all right, based on the way that our users are interacting with it, I may need to adjust how I think about this. I may need to maybe, use more of the topic-based approach. I'm going to use more prompts. I'm going to actually, perhaps even in some cases, take knowledge out of the agent because it's confusing. It's conflicting. It's, it's got bad titles or descriptions. So I think that's going to be very powerful. It's a little bit more for our advanced maker, because obviously you have to have access to the conversational transcript table for that feature to light up. That's by design, because we don't want to be exposing, conversation history to people that don't have already access to said table. But as you think about the ways in which we're trying to roll these features in, analytics is for everyone. We should, make sure the analytics, anyone in the maker type persona should have access to that. And then you get into like peeling back the onion of additional functionality that we're exposing with the right level of security.
Mike, I've got so many questions.
You said the magic word.
I have so many, and try not to turn this into a 2-hour episode here. First off, can we take a step back and just talk about the extensibility? Because you're talking about all these different knowledge sources and so on. Maybe a two-part of the question. What does the extensibility look like? Like, what data sources can I use, right? And how easy is it for us to connect that? And who is the person? Is it the administrator that's connecting all of these things? Is it the user? Who is the end user? Who's doing this?
So I'll go with the variety of knowledge sources first, and then I'll try and connect to the who persona, because I think that one may be a little bit of it depends, and I try not to say that. So from an ad knowledge perspective, you've got your public websites, you've got OneDrive and SharePoint. It's kind of like your internal graph pieces. And we've done a lot of work there. I'll say there's probably some folks on the listening base who are like, oh man, SharePoint, like that's, everything's in SharePoint, whether I like it or not. And I really would love that response rate to be a little better. So we've done a bunch of work, 4x improvements on latency, other things you'll see in the next little while. You've got Dataverse, you've got file drag and drop. Those are like your main ones. And then you have kind of like advanced knowledge that also sits in that space. You've got Azure AI Search. You've now got access to the graph connectors, which if folks are familiar, that's the M365 version of a Power Platform connector. The difference being that data lands in Substrate to be vectorized, which is not the case, obviously, in our Power Platform connectors, which is just a GET call. So you've got graph connectors in there, and then you've got Fabric. So those are the big knowledge sources that you have. There may be a few others that I missed. And then, on the actions side of things, you've got your Power Platform connectors, you've got your prompts, right, triggers. So any questions on that before I go into the who?
Now the big one.
So many questions, but I'm saving all of them until you answer this question first.
I'm trying to behave. I'm behaving here, Mike. Just please continue.
It's kind of you. The second piece is who's doing this? we want to, as much as possible, always empower the admin has the knobs, but we want to make it secure so that the admin can delegate this access to those individuals that I'd say are more, we call them almost like, department admins, or you're kind of, in some cases, maybe they're the logo team in an organization that are working with individual business unit users, because the knowledge that goes inside of these copilots should look and feel different based on the job that you're doing. And so this is not, to me, the sysadmin Mac overall rule where there is like one single agent that you plunk into Copilot. And that was the problem with enterprise search, candidly. It was just so heavy with so much stuff. You couldn't get the specific question. It was great for HR time policy. It was horrible for anything specific to HR time policy in your given region. And so what we're trying to do here is give the tools to those individuals that are not necessarily like a level down, but their scope is more constrained to the areas and the business problems they're trying to solve. So admin still has all of the knobs. They control the access as required. But can we give this new, domain business user creator who's always existed? We just didn't really have a space for them necessarily. We call them makers generically, but we always knew they were building apps that were specific, a given area, domain, problem. Those same people are going to be the ones that are building the agents of the future and the connectivity between those agents across their enterprise.
Right. Now I'm even more curious because you said more things than it just.
The key for this to just not say things. And
Stop talking. Like, stop talking.
What a podcast that'll be.
You already hit my trigger word like 3 times, and I keep trying not to jump into it, but I have to now because you've said security, then secure, and something else about related to data security and
I know my audience
and so on. So I'm curious here. The data that we have here now, we have made massive investments across Microsoft itself in securing the platform. Not that we haven't in the past, but we are doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on security right now.
Mm-hmm.
What can our customers expect in terms of protecting their knowledge and their data within their organization from the advancements that we've made in the platform in your specific area?
Yeah, secure by default is the rallying cry here in Microsoft. And I think it is one of our competitive advantages. That's why you probably hear me talk about it a little bit. And I know in your space, as well as in team, obviously in Dataverse, it underlines a lot of the tooling that gets into this. And Sean, Andy will have a great session on this at Ignite. If folks miss it, they should kind of go back and check on that one. The ways in which we think about security, and specifically the data component of it, doesn't stray from the existing security apparatus that we have today. DLP, the connectors, is still there. We've added VNet to connectors. That still applies for the Copilot as well. The role-based access control that exists with OAuth when we use M365, or the SSO token handoff when you're an M365 user into Copilot Studio. Those are all things that we put in place specifically to ensure that there is a secure by default posture. And when you're working across systems, that is of the utmost importance, because I think in this world of publicly available large language models and a lot of startups in this space, you can relatively quickly create a business that uses an LLM and uses the data in the 4 walls. When you start making cross-region calls, we have policies in place for the European Union, for Asia, for certain features even, government specifically, of where we're actually not allowing data to move or certain features to exist because they require, a certain cross-region call. These startups can't provide that level of granularity. It's taken us 20 years to build up the security apparatus that we have. And that's a real competitive advantage for us. And the external calls that we make to, third-party systems, whether it's Salesforce or ServiceNow or what have you, that don't have Azure Active Directory and single sign-on. In those situations, we've created, albeit maybe an extra step or click in the process, the forcing function for the end user to have to install their credentials before they can access the said connector. Because we do not want a sprawl of access or a delegate control or perhaps any type of like misappropriated exfiltration that could come out of that. So, we're very deliberate about the knowledge that's being used. We follow the environment construct inside a Power Platform, which then obviously nests into, our 10 construct and all of the associated ACLs there. And PPAC remains in place. If you want to use big switches, they're also there in the Microsoft Admin Center. And you're going to see some really cool improvements with the Security Hub that will be coming at Ignite as well around the ways in which we manage Copilot and usage associated with that.
You're speaking my love language right here, Mike, so I appreciate it. Just a quick thing that you mentioned inside of here. When you said the Admin Center, it made me think about managed environments. And I think one of the misconceptions that we have about some of the tooling within the platform is that managed environments is simply just about governance. It's not necessarily about security and compliance. But the suite itself actually helps you to govern, secure, and operate the platform. And the Power Platform Admin Center, if you will, is like, I think Ryan Jones said it once, it's like mission control, right? It's like NASA when you're launching a rocket. It's where all of these things come together and you have all these different portals. You mentioned one or two, like Security Hub and Copilot Hub. I love that, again, that you've said that. And again, please keep talking to me. You warm my heart, Mike. It's just
Ken, I greatly appreciate you doing my job for me, talking about how, Power Platform provides the capabilities for securing operational, management as well as governance across Power Platform. So, Mike, like build is happening,
Ignite.
But not everybody can attend because it's sold out like immediately. For those that are listening and, want to know more about the topics that we covered today on the podcast, I know you have a session.
Yep.
Can you please drop the name of the session so they can look it up?
Yeah. So Ignite coming up fast. So breakout, there's a couple sessions that I will be in supporting. So I will be doing the live demo in Copilot Studios breakout 165 for how to add knowledge to your agent in Omar Aftab's Copilot Studio on day one. Then I have my own session that I'll be co-hosting with Jen Cockrell, which is Ground M365 Copilot in Your Business Knowledge. That's on the Wednesday. So that's breakout 275. And so if you're not familiar kind of with the number approach, you have your L100s, that's kind of your overview. Then you hit your 200s. So 275 is going to be a little bit more technical than you're going to see in 165. So you can, prioritize your time accordingly if you've only got so many sessions to watch. And then we actually do have a couple other breakouts with Dataverse as well that are happening. We can probably put them in the show notes for folks that want to jump into that. But we have sessions every single day in Chicago at Ignite. And specifically the knowledge pieces will be on the Tuesday in breakout 165 and on the Wednesday with breakout 275.
Very cool. And we've got tons of content for security, for governance, Dataverse. We'll drop links to all the sessions so you can add it to your backpack if you want to watch it later. But I highly recommend checking out Mike's sessions. We had to limit the knowledge Mike could share on here because it is purely a podcast. But at Ignite, there will be visuals. And like Mike said, it'll get more technical. So we highly recommend checking that out. Mike, always a pleasure chatting with you. Can't wait to have you back on the show again because Ken really had to trim down his questions from 300 to 6. So we got a lot more down the hopper for this. But anyway, Mike, thank you so much. Looking forward to Ignite and looking forward to a great show.
Absolutely. It was a blast being here as usual. I'll go back and readjust the product backlog based on the notes I get from Ken. And we'll see you guys all in 2025.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.